Welcome to the DY Prize channel. I'm your guy, DY Fly. What it do? Now, I've been listening to a lot of Queens of the Stone Age lately, and I've even made a mix with all the songs that I like from all their albums. They only got a couple skips from all their albums. Really a great band to listen to. But they got this album called Like Clockwork. And on that album, they have a song called Like Clockwork. And while I was cleaning up yesterday, I saw that this article, this hit piece, dropped on Jalenhurts from ESPN's Tim McManus. And I'm thinking to myself, here we go again. And my initial reaction was a lot like a lot of y'all's, is that ESPN needs clicks and views right now. So, of course, they have to come to America's team, the Philadelphia Eagles. And that might be news to a lot of y'all, but the Philadelphia Eagles is America's team, okay? No other team's Big Four, meaning the collection of the owner, GM, head coach, and quarterback, is as interesting to talk about than the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm talking about as a collective. No other team in the NFL is as interesting to talk about than the Eagles. And you might think to yourself, oh, well, Jeffrey Lurie, he's not that interesting to talk about. Well, he comes out of his pocket to make things shake for our team. Yeah, and a lot of owners, they don't like that. It kind of puts pressure on them for them to do it. Then you look at Howie. Of course, he's always making things shake and making things move, making deals, manipulating the salary cap and all that stuff. I think he's got that down pat. I think we're going to look back at this era and see that the 1-year deals that he's been pulling off, I think we're going to, that might be the catalyst for us getting our next championship. But we're going to see. But Howie Roseman, he's the best at what he does. Then you look at Nick Sirianni. He's controversial because people look at him and he's a dope. But then you look at his win percentage and he's up there with the best of them of all time. So apparently he's doing something right. But we're going to talk about Nick. Then, of course, our quarterback, Jalen, Hitman, Hurts.
The excellence of execution.
That's right. He's been controversial since his days at Alabama and Oklahoma. People still are holding on to their reservations about Jalen Hurts and his playing style and what he can't do. And we're going to talk about all that. But, we know the history. He's a Super Bowl champion. He's a Super Bowl MVP. He's answered all the questions. But it was very easy for me to jump to that conclusion and be like, they need ratings. They need clicks and views. So let's use Jalen Hurts' name to make the needle move. Okay? Because I'm like, my two main questions that I had was why now? Why drop this now? And who gave the green light for Tim McManus to drop this article? Now, is Tim McManus still a $2 hoe for writing this article? Yes, he is. Because he had a choice and he chose to do it. So he's bought and paid for. But who gave him the green light? That's what I want to know, because we keep going through this cycle of having hit pieces come out about Jalen Hurts. And with the season that we had last year, I'm trying to figure out why Nick Sirianni is not under more pressure publicly. He's been stripped of everything except his head coaching title and being a figurehead. But why is he still here? Because this keeps happening. But I wanted to wait to see if I got some more information so my initial reaction wasn't wrong. And I had a 5% inkling the answer to who it was might be more devastating than what we want it to be. Okay? And I'm going to go through these tweets, but I just want to say this. Jalen Hurts is in a hostile work environment, ladies and gentlemen. Jalen Hurts is in a hostile working environment, and he's behind enemy lines. I don't know if this is clear to anybody else, but it's clear to me. Okay? You might disagree with this, but I'm just giving you my 2 cents and how I'm seeing it. Every time a hit piece comes out, there's clues and buzzwords that go off of upper management, and the higher ups think this, that, and the other of Jalen Hurts. And I'm thinking to myself, who cares about Joe Schmo in accounting or the scout team coordinator or whoever it is? Who cares what they think? The only two people who are higher up that I care about is Howie and Jeffrey. So who else are they talking about? And I think we need to start putting a microscope on those guys and why we need to ask the questions of why hit pieces like this keeps happening. Like, I find it funny in the article where it says Jalen is uncoachable, right? Now, I'm thinking to myself, Jalen seems like he's a simple guy. You know, if you tell him 1 + 1 = 2, he can roll with that because it makes sense, right? But if you tell him 1 + 1 = 7,076, he's going to be like, nah, I'm not going with that. I'm not going with that. That doesn't make any sense. And, you know, all these coordinators that he's had over the years, he's got a different voice in his head, right? Talking to him throughout the headset. Some of them he can trust, some of them he can't. But you know the one that he can trust is the one in his own head, him. So if he starts calling his own plays because the guy telling him 1 + 1 = 776, well, there you have it. Jalen is not. I don't know Jalen, but you know, we seem to have kindred spirits. He doesn't seem like he's trying to be difficult, but if things don't add up to where it's making logical sense, where things are flowing and they're moving in the right direction, yeah, he's going to have some questions. He might have some pushback, and he might start doing his own thing. So that's a coaching issue. Because we know Jalen Hurts is good enough to get the job done. And I mentioned it in one of my videos. I kind of glossed over it, but I did kind of touch on it, that the handling of Jeff Stoutland was absolutely disgusting. It was. I was going to do a video on it, on how the Philadelphia Eagles is basically a corporation, you know, like a 9-to-5 corporation that me and you go to, because I've seen it up close and personal. One of the organizations that I worked at, a very large company known all around the world, they had a CEO regime change, and the new elected CEO, he comes in and he's on his Limp Bizkit type shit, you know, my way or the highway. And some of the upper brass that were under him, you know, that they've been there for 20-something years, they were basically given an ultimatum, you know, and lo and behold, we're having a retirement party for some of the people that wasn't with the program. And me and my manager at the time, shout out to Big N.O. You know, within a couple weeks, me and him, we calling the new CEO Beans. Yeah, we calling him Beans. You ever seen State Property with Beanie Siegel? And he says, you know, you got to get down and lay down. That's how he was carrying the operation. And that's what it seems like with the Philadelphia Eagles right now. And I'm always going to be a fan, but, you know, I don't have to like everything that they do. I'm no less of a fan than you. All right. But I don't have any connections with the team. So, you know, I don't have any problem saying the truth and coming with the thunder of God. That's right. But the handling of Jeff Stoutland and him helping us bring 2 championships to the city, and the fact that he was stripped of his run game duties in the early portion of the season last year, so Dumb and Dumber could run the show, Nick Sirianni and Kevin Patullo.
I do not deserve to be treated like trash.
Is absolutely disgusting. But putting out a statement saying, you know, saying something that's contradictory to what happened, you know, guys like Jeff Stoutland, they don't come around too often, and you got to let guys like that leave on their own terms. But you find a way to integrate them into, you know, what's going on. You don't just let those type of guys go. You might, all right, you want to bring in a new system? All right, well, you know, you still need somebody to train up a Jordan Mailata. If you're going to draft a lineman late, you still need somebody to train him up. The new guy that we got, I don't even know his name, but apparently he's from the Vikings. He's a bum. So, yeah, I have questions. Anyway, I digress. Let's get into some of these tweets that made me want to wait to see if my gut instinct was correct. But this tweet by Fly Eagles Fly Bets, they had some questions, and this is what they had to say. My biggest question about the Jalen Hurts article isn't what was said, it's when it was dropped. Who benefits the most from when the story drops? That's a good question. First thing in the morning, the day after the owners' meetings ends, that timing isn't accidental, it's strategic. Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman, and Jeffrey Lurie all spoke during the week. Then the story drops the morning after they're off the record with no chance for reporters to follow up and have to get on the record for this. That's how you get a message out without having to answer for it. Lori was on the record absolutely raving about Hurts, so it's hard to not wonder who benefits most from that timing. That's a good point. That's a really good point. And you come out here to the comments, and Niebert says, have you considered it's people from other teams with access to grind? We are talking about anonymous BS. Generally, this stuff is a bunch of lies. And Fly Eagles Fly Bets replies, no chance, it's Philly reporters. It's anonymous because when they put a name to it, they get destroyed, like when BG said AJ and Hurts wasn't that close a few years ago. That's a good point. That's a good point. I didn't think about who has the benefit from, this dropping, but it's just baffling to me because I'm like, why is there no hit pieces on Nick Sirianni coming out? Why did Kevin Patullo get the whole season to fail when everybody involved with Philadelphia media, the team, the fans, everybody could see that Kevin Patullo was clearly the problem and the issue, and he should have been fired at least for us to see if we can save our season. It doesn't make sense why both of those guys were protected. So I'm looking at Howie. And you know what? I'm going to get to that. But continuing on, Maverick Silencer comments, my instinct tells me that it's Howie. Howie was about to trade him for Russell Wilson at the end of 2021 before Russ said no. Then Mr. Lurie said he wanted to build on him, and the 2022 explosion happened. Howie is in a bind as his boss loves Jalen to death, but him personally, Fly Eagles Fly replies, fully agree. And I'm sure Lurie isn't happy how he's played either, while he can still love him overall, which is true. It's clear that they want him to play better and get their message. I completely agree. Which I think the job that Howie has done, I give Howie Roseman a lot of credit, but I think the job he has done has made Nick and Jalen a meat shield to Jeffrey and Howie, because there's been a lot of bullshit that's been going on the past couple years. All right. We've had one of the leakiest locker rooms in the past couple years, and it's maddening. I don't want to hear about anonymous sources throughout a whole season. Like, I remember 2023, that's when it really got bad. That's when it started bothering me. Then 2024, the Super Bowl season happens. Then last year, it's just been a mess. It's been a complete mess. We've got to start putting them under a microscope, Jeffrey and Howie, to be like, yo, clean this up. Clean this up. Unless Jeffrey likes it, unless Jeffrey likes the attention, maybe he likes the attention. I don't know. We're going to find out. Let's scroll down. Stephen Maurer says, good point. And I'll add that I'm curious why Tim McManus didn't ask about the topics in the article he was writing. He had a chance. You can hear his voice on the Lurie press conference, and yet he doesn't inquire about the issues he writes about. Fly Eagles Fly Bets replies, because it came from them and they didn't want to respond to it directly. What? And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting down to the root of it. Just stick with me. I think that's what it is, man. I think Nick, Howie, and maybe even Jeffrey. I don't give a shit about what he said publicly. I mean, that's easy to say. All right? Because Jalen, he's been great publicly. He's a part of the Jordan brand. He's clean cut. He represents the city well. He represents the team well. He represents his family well. He's a good representative of a team, But they might like what they like. They want to be a high-flying offense, but they want to – the thing is, they could be that, but they want it to look a certain way. They want to put a square peg in a round hole. Why don't you use Jalen Hurts as a weapon and accentuate what he does well instead of trying to make him into Joe Burrow? It doesn't make sense. I digress. Crimson Cleo, she writes, because the news cycle was dead and the media needs us to talk about something. That makes much more sense than the notion the front office is somehow trying to do him in, counter to the effusive praise they've given him for the last 6 years. And, that seems simple. That seems simple, but he has a no trade clause. He has a no trade clause in his contract. Somebody might have a little bit of resentment towards that, a.k.a. Howie. So, initially that's what I thought. And I'm like, they have so much more that they could talk about. They could talk about Puka Nacua turning into Dracula, biting hoes on the neck, checking into rehab. What? They don't want to talk about that. They could talk about the San Francisco 49ers and why Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, why they can't get over the hump. They can talk about them signing Mike Evans and Christian Kirk. They can talk about Christian McCaffrey and how miraculously he played all 16 or 17 games with double bilateral Achilles tendinosis. They could have talked about that and maybe even hinted that him and LeBron, they might have the same doctor. They might have the same doctor, allegedly. But that's another topic for another day. They could have talked about Josh Allen getting his coach fired. They could have talked about that and how he's 0-7 in overtime games. Right? They could have talked about, them signing DJ Moore. Right? And if they're going to get over the hump, the Bills. They could have talked about Joe Burrow and how he's consistently put into top 5 conversations but can't make the playoffs to save his life. Huh? They could talk about Justin Herbert and how he might be a coach killer. Oh, my God. And they need to stack the deck for him, getting John Harbaugh and Mike McDaniel just so he can win a playoff game. And you know what? Breaking news. Justin Herbert just threw another interception. They had so many they can talk about many things, right? And like I said, initially I thought it was just to get some motion on ESPN, but it seems like it's more than that. And Fly Eagles Flyer, he replies, the news cycle wasn't dead. They were at the owners meeting all week and interviewed every big-time Eagle higher up. Tim McManus and Jeremy Fowler were at the owners meeting all week. Why wasn't a single question asked to them if they had 10-plus sources talking to them about it? Hey, man, that's what I'm saying. These are questions we need to start asking. It's a very divisive topic, but, we need to clean some stuff up, man. If Jalen Hurts isn't appreciated by the front office, I don't know. PR52 asks, who benefits from it? And Fly Eagles Fly, he responds, impossible to know, but if I had to guess, it's coming from the higher-ups sending a message to Jalen before 8 OTAs. My guess is Howie. Look, we got to start asking the questions. All right. We got to start asking the questions. And like I said, every hit piece, it has the buzzwords of higher ups and stuff like that. And there's so many things not adding up. It's not adding up. Like this idiot right here, Brady says, I got to say, I do respect how much Eagles fans ride for Hurts. I genuinely think 99% of them would rather die than let anyone criticize him. Well, see, the thing he doesn't understand, like a lot of people don't understand, is context matters. We are the smartest fans in the league. We understand that Jalen, he's not the best, okay? If you compare his speed to Lamar Jackson, if you have a slider scale or whatever, Lamar Jackson might be a 10 on speed, right? Jalen Hurts might be a 7, like 6 or 7, whatever, right? You throwing power. Comparing him to Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, their power might be a 10, but Jalen Hurts might be like an 8 or something, right? But he has things that these guys don't have, which is, IQ, football IQ. Might be like a 9 or 10. Clutch gene. He's making all the necessary throws when they need to be made. 10. Deep ball. 10. Right?
This is what greatness looks like.
That's what I'm talking about. The point I'm trying to make is if the bigger talking heads would actually do their job and hold these other quarterbacks accountable and hold their feet to the fire, and instead of trashing and piling on our quarterback and always telling us what he can't do, instead of recognizing what he can do and, having a level conversation all across the board about these quarterbacks, then we wouldn't need to deify Jalen Hurts and put him up on God status. But until that happens, until they get Dan Orlovsky super bum off the air, until they get, ESPN doubled down and hired King Bum of Chase Daniel. They tag team the bums until he gets off the air and stop spewing nonsense about our quarterback and stop propping up these other bums. It's amazing to me. They copied and pasted Jalen Hurts' template of having a coordinator every single year for the past like 10 years on to Baker Mayfield. And now we're supposed to have some sort of sympathy for Baker Mayfield and why he keeps flaming out every season. Get out of here, man. You see how they have this double standard? They're not talking about Justin Herbert. They're not talking about Josh Allen. They're not talking about how Joe Burrow can't even make it to the playoffs with the best wide receiver duo in the league. They're not talking about it. But yet my quarterback, my second round drafted quarterback, is held to a higher standard than those guys. But yet they're constantly rated over them. Man, stop. Lastly, I'll say this because this is going kind of long. When you get a chance, go to Bears Fan and Bear Country. They did a great post just breaking down for the last 3 years. Whenever Nick Sirianni's job security is threatened, Jalen Hurts character hit piece drops within 48 hours. I would suggest you guys go read this. He did a really good job of just breaking down the last couple years. Anytime Nick Sirianni was, questioned or his job was in jeopardy, he's been stripped of all offensive duties. But anytime he's been questioned or, he's on the hot seat, Jalen Hurts propaganda piece drops. And, he did a great job of explaining everything. I would say, whenever you get a chance, go and check out and read what he had to say on that. So it looks like to me that Nick, he's definitely behind this. Howie might also be behind this. But sadly, also, Jeffrey might be behind this. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm on Nick Sirianni's ass this season. All right, I'm on his ass this season. He doesn't get a button push from that here on out. The line has been drawn. Okay, Jalen Hurts, he is in a hostile work environment right now. I hate for this to be divisive, but until I see some changes, and this stuff keeps happening, I'm backing my beige brother, Jalen Hitman Hurts.
The excellence of execution.
What?
This is what.
Hold on.
So let me go on record as saying, I am a man's man. I am a champion of champions. Do you people understand? Do you understand? This is what greatness looks like. Take a good look at it. Look at it. Look at it.
That's right. That being said, we got to start keeping an eye on Nick, Howie, and Jeffrey and how they're conducting business with our Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP quarterback, Jalen Hitman Hurts.
Nigga, you gonna get down or you gonna fucking lay down?